Imagine for a moment that your photograph could grow old and bear the weight of your wrongdoing, but you would remain eternally young and unaffected by the passage of time. This is precisely what is portrayed in Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray, in which a young man's wish leads him into a life filled with luxury, greed, and a secret that is concealed beneath his attic. It's getting darker and darker. This is an interesting story about how a single, seemingly innocent desire spirals into a saga of moral corruption and haunted beauty. And if you're intrigued by the way in which beauty can mask a twisted reality, then you should watch this video till the end. This novel is nearly 300 pages long, but we're going to summarize the entire story in just a few minutes. So without wasting any time, let's get started. But before that, suggest us in the comments some more novels to summarize, and hit the subscribe button to support us. Alright. So our story begins in the grand London residence of Lady Brandon, where the talented artist Basil Hallward is about to have an encounter that will change his life. At his aunt's home, Basil meets Dorian Gray, a young man who isn't just wealthy and cultured, but also strikingly handsome. Dorian's stunning beauty captures Basil's artistic spirit, and he becomes the subject of several of his paintings, often portrayed as a hero from ancient Greece or a character from mythology. So at the initial portion of the novel, Basil is putting the finishing touches in a portrait of Dorian, showing him exactly as he is. However, Basil confides in his friend Lord Henry Wotton that he's somewhat disappointed with the painting. He feels it reveals too much of his own feelings for Dorian. Lord Henry, known for his sharp wit and love for stirring up scandal, sees it differently. He tells Basil that the painting is actually his finest work. Now when Dorian arrives at the studio, and though Basil is hesitant, he introduces him to Lord Henry. Basil worries that Lord Henry might be a bad influence on the young and impressionable Dorian. It turns out Basil has every reason to be concerned. During their conversation, Lord Henry gives a speech about the fleeting nature of beauty and youth, which deeply disturbs Dorian. Upset by the thought of losing his greatest attributes, Dorian makes a rash wish. He curses the portrait, hoping it would age and carry the burdens of his actions instead of him, allowing him to remain forever young. Caught in a moment of emotional turmoil, Dorian even declares he would give his soul if only the portrait could age in his place. After hearing Dorian's desperate outburst, Lord Henry expresses a desire to own the painting. However, Basil, perhaps sensing how deeply the conversation has affected Dorian, insists that the portrait rightfully belongs to Dorian himself. After that startling revelation in Basil's studio, Lord Henry's influence over Dorian only grows stronger. In the following weeks, Dorian becomes deeply captivated by Lord Henry's philosophy of new hedonism, dedicating himself to a life focused solely on seeking pleasure. During this time, Dorian falls in love with Sybil Vane, a talented young actress performing in a rundown theater in the less glamorous parts of London. Dorian is enchanted by her performances, while Sybil, in return, sees Dorian as her Prince Charming, completely dismissing her brother James's warnings that Dorian might not have her best interests at heart. As Sybil's feelings for Dorian deepen, she finds herself unable to continue acting. How can she pretend to love on stage when she's experiencing such intense emotions in real life? Sadly, when Dorian learns that Sybil can no longer act, his affection for her fades. He had fallen for the character she portrayed, not the person she truly was. Heartbroken by her inability to perform, Dorian cruelly ends their agreement and leaves her. Returning home from his harsh breakup, Dorian notices something chilling. The portrait Basil had painted, which shows his face, has changed. It now bears a sneer, a cruel twist that seems to mirror his own cruel actions. This frightens Dorian, as it appears that his impulsive wish for the portrait to age and bear the marks of his sins instead of him might actually be coming true. Resolved to correct his wrongs, Dorian plans to reconcile with Sybil the next day. However, his intentions come to a tragic halt when Lord Henry arrives with devastating news. Sybil has taken her own life. Lord Henry, ever the provocateur, persuades Dorian to view her death as a dramatic piece of art, a tragic performance, a masterpiece. Pushed by Lord Henry's twisted reasoning, Dorian decides to dismiss the incident and move on. Meanwhile, the change in the portrait horrifies Dorian to the extent that he decides to hide it away. He moves the painting to a secluded room at the top of his house, where no one else can see its transformation. This secret room becomes the sole witness to the physical reflection of Dorian's increasingly dark deeds, safely hidden away from the eyes of the world. As Dorian continues down his hedonistic path, the hidden portrait serves as a haunting reminder of the heavy price his soul pays with each passing day. After the tragic end to his relationship with Sybil, Dorian sinks further into the hedonistic teachings of Lord Henry. As part of his descent, Lord Henry gives Dorian a book detailing the scandalous life of a 19th century freshman. This book captivates Dorian, Becoming a sort of guide as he plunges deeper into a life marked by sin and moral abandon, Dorian dedicates himself to chasing new experiences and sensations, caring little for the traditional standards of right and wrong or the consequences of his increasingly wild lifestyle. As time flies, 18 years roll by. Despite Dorian's notorious deeds and the dark rumors swirling around him, he remains a fixture in London's high society. His unchanged, youthful appearance keeps him in the good graces of the social elite, even as whispers of his misdeeds continue to spread. However, while Dorian's physical beauty remains untouched by time, the figure in his hidden portrait tells a different story. It turns ever more grotesque, reflecting the corruption of Dorian's soul. One gloomy, fog-laden night, the situation reaches a breaking point. Basil Hallward, the artist who once captured Dorian's youthful essence on canvas, visits Dorian's home. Disturbed by the rumors and concerned for his friend, Basil confronts Dorian about the destructive path he's taken. Their conversation heats up, and in a moment of desperation to show Basil the truth, Dorian reveals the now monstrous portrait, the true mirror of his degraded soul. Horrified by the sight, Basil begs Dorian to seek redemption, to repent for his sins. But Dorian, consumed by his own darkness, declares it's too late for him to change his ways. Overwhelmed by rage and fear that Basil might expose him, Dorian kills him in a fit of anger. This act marks a chilling point of no return for Dorian, who is now not just morally, but criminally wrong. The once innocent young man is fully transformed into a figure of true villainy, ensnared by his own unchecked desires. After the dreadful murder of Basil, Dorian Gray finds himself in desperate need of covering up his crime. He reaches out to an old friend, a doctor, whom he coerces into helping him by holding a dark secret over his head. With a body taken care of, Dorian, burdened by guilt and fear, seeks escape in an opium den. It's here that he runs into James Vane, Sybil's brother, who had been hunting for Dorian to avenge his sister's death. In a panic, Dorian manages to slip away and flees to the safety of his country estate. While trying to bleck into the life of luxury and leisure with his guests, Dorian's past catches up with him. He spots James Vane watching him from outside a window, and the sight fills him with terror. His fear, however, is short-lived. During a hunting party of his estate, James is accidentally shot and killed. With James gone, Dorian breathes a sigh of relief, mistakenly believing he's safe once again. This brush with death sparks a moment of introspection for Dorian. He resolves to change his ways and amend his life, and he finds himself unable to confess to his past crimes. When he looks at the portrait, which now should reflect his desire to change, he sees only hypocrisy. In a moment of rage and desperation, Dorian grabs the same knife he used to kill Basil and stabs the painting, hoping to destroy the haunting image of his corrupted soul. Suddenly, there's a loud crash. When his servants rush into the room, they find a shocking scene. The portrait, once marred by the signs of Dorian's sins, now shows him as the beautiful young man he once was. On the floor lies Dorian's body, aged, withered, and disfigured, a knife plunged into his heart. The curse of the portrait is broken, but it's too late for Dorian. His life ends in tragedy, a stark reminder of the price of vanity and unchecked desire, bringing our dark tale to its close. This way, the haunting tale of Dorian Gray comes to an end. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video. If you found the story interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more captivating summaries like this. Until next time, keep turning the pages. See you in the next video.